The rain battered the windows of Eli's Brooklyn apartment, a relentless drumbeat that matched the storm in his chest. He stared at the phone, its screen glowing with his mother's name missed call 17. Cutting her off had been like carving out a piece of himself. But tonight, freedom tasted sharper than regret. Eli was 27, a graphic designer with a knack for seeing beauty in chaos, though he rarely saw it in his own life. His mother, Diane, was a vortex of manipulation, her love a barbed wire that left him bleeding. For years, he'd endured her belittling rants, her insistence that his bisexuality was a phase he'd outgrow. Last month, he'd finally snapped, blocking her number after she'd screamed that he'd never be normal. The silence since had been deafening, but liberating. Now, sprawled on his couch, Eli scrolled through messages from his therapist. Dr. Nathan Cole. Nathan was 29, a soft-spoken man with kind hazel eyes and a knack for unraveling Eli's tangled thoughts. Their sessions had become a lifeline, a space where Eli could breathe without judgment. Tonight, Nathan had texted, "Can we meet outside the office? There's something I need to share." Eli's pulse quickened. Was it a breakthrough? Or something more? The doorbell buzzed, sharp and insistent. Eli opened it to find Nathan, rain-soaked, his usual calm replaced by a nervous edge. "Eli, I shouldn't be here," Nathan started, his voice low. "But I can't keep this from you." Before Eli could respond, Nathan stepped inside, water dripping onto the hardwood. "Your mother, she's dating someone I know. Someone close." Eli's stomach twisted. "Who?" he asked, dreading the answer. "It's me," Nathan said, his words a quiet detonation. "I didn't know she was your mother until last week. I swear." "Eli, I never meant." Eli's laughter cut him off, bitter and jagged. "You're screwing my mom. My therapist." The room spun. The man who'd helped him rebuild was tangled in the very web he'd fought to escape. Nathan reached out, but Eli flinched. "Don't," he spat. "Just explain." Nathan sank onto the couch, hands trembling. He'd met Diane at a coffee shop, he said, a chance encounter that spiraled into a few dates. She'd never mentioned Eli by name, only vague rants about a disappointing son. When Nathan saw a photo of Eli on her fridge, the pieces clicked. "I wanted to tell you in person," Nathan said. "I'm ending it with her. It's not right. Not when you're my client. Not when." He trailed off, eyes searching Eli's. Eli's anger churned with something else, something dangerous, like the pull he'd felt in their sessions. The way Nathan's quiet strength made him feel seen. "When what?" Eli pressed, his voice softer now. "Raw." Nathan hesitated, then met his gaze. "Not when I'm starting to care about you." The air thickened, charged with unspoken truths. Eli's heart raced, torn between betrayal and a flicker of hope. He'd spent years hiding parts of himself, but Nathan saw them all: his fears, his desires, his scars. Could he trust this? Could he trust him? Outside, the rain slowed to a whisper, but inside, the storm was just beginning. Eli sank onto the couch beside Nathan, their knees brushing. "What do we do now?" he asked, voice barely audible. Nathan didn't answer, but his hand found Eli's, a tentative anchor in the chaos. For the first time in years, Eli didn't pull away. Eli woke the next morning to a text from Diane. "We need to talk. I know about you and Nathan." His blood ran cold. How did she know? Had Nathan told her? The thought gnawed at him as he dressed, his mind replaying last night's conversation. Nathan's confession had cracked something open in Eli, a fragile hope he hadn't dared name. But Diane's message was a reminder. She always found a way to claw back in. He met Nathan at a diner, The kind with sticky tables and coffee that tasted like regret. Nathan looked wrecked. His usual poise frayed. She saw us, he admitted. Last night. Outside your building. She was waiting in her car. Eli's jaw tightened. Diane's obsession with control hadn't ended with his silence. She'd been watching him, stalking his life like a ghost. She thinks we're together. Nathan continued, his voice heavy. She called me this morning, screaming that I'm corrupting you. I told her it's over between us. But she won't let this go. Eli's hands clenched around his mug. She never does. He muttered. Diane's rage was a familiar beast. But now it had a new target, Nathan. Eli's phone buzzed again. Another text from Diane. You're ruining everything. Again. He shoved the phone into his pocket, his chest tight. She's not wrong, he said, half to himself. I ruin things. Always have. Nathan's hand brushed his across the table. A quiet rebuttal. You don't ruin anything, Eli. She does. The diner faded as Eli met Nathan's eyes, seeing not just his therapist, but a man who'd chosen him over Diane's chaos. It was reckless, maybe even wrong. But Eli felt the pull again, that dangerous, electric hope. What if she's right about me? He asked, voice breaking. Nathan leaned closer, his voice steady. Then I'm right about you too. And I see someone worth fighting for. By noon, Eli was back in his apartment, staring at a blank canvas on his easel. Art had always been his escape, a way to make sense of the mess inside him. He grabbed a brush, letting colors bleed across the canvas, angry reds, bruised purples, a slash of gold for the hope he barely trusted. His phone stayed silent, but he knew Diane wasn't done. She never was. That evening, Nathan called. She's threatening to report me, he said, his voice tight. For ethics violations. She says I crossed a line with you. Eli's heart sank. Nathan could lose his license, his career, everything. This is my fault, Eli said, guilt clawing at him. No. Nathan cut in. I made my choices. And I'd make them again. Eli hung up, his mind a battlefield. He'd cut Diane out to protect himself. But she'd found a new way to wound him through Nathan. Yet Nathan's words lingered, a lifeline in the dark. Eli didn't know if he could trust this fragile thing between them. But he wanted to try. For once. He wanted to fight for something that felt real. The next day, Eli stood outside Nathan's office, a nondescript building in Manhattan's Flatiron district. The air was crisp, the city humming with early fall energy. But Eli felt like he was walking into a trap. He hadn't slept, haunted by Diane's threats and Nathan's confession. He'd come to end their session's professional boundaries had to hold. Didn't they? But his heart wasn't so sure. Inside, Nathan's office was a sanctuary of soft grays and warm wood, a stark contrast to the chaos outside. Nathan sat behind his desk, his face a mix of relief and worry as Eli entered. I didn't think you'd come, he said, standing. Eli shrugged, avoiding his eyes. I almost didn't. But we need to figure this out. They sat, the space between them heavy with unspoken questions. I've referred you to another therapist, Nathan said, sliding a card across the desk. It's the right thing to do. Eli stared at the card, his throat tight. So that's it. You're just done with me. Nathan's jaw tensed. I'm trying to protect you, Eli, and myself. If Diane reports me, it's over. My career, my reputation gone. Eli's anger flared. So you're running. After everything you said. Nathan leaned forward, his voice low but fierce. I'm not running. I'm trying to keep us both safe. But I meant what I said last night. I care about you more than I should. The admission hung there, raw and unguarded. Eli's pulse raced, caught between wanting to bolt and wanting to close the distance between them. Before he could respond, his phone vibrated. Another text from Diane. You think you can steal him from me? You'll regret this. Eli's hands shook as he showed Nathan the screen. She's unhinged. Nathan muttered, rubbing his temples. I ended it with her. Eli. Cleanly. But she's not letting go. Eli laughed bitterly. Welcome to my life. They spent the next hour strategizing. Nathan would document everything: his relationship with Diane, their breakup, her threats to protect himself if she followed through. Eli, meanwhile, would keep his distance, though every instinct screamed to fight back. She's always controlled me, Eli admitted, his voice cracking. Even now, when I'm trying to be free. Nathan reached across the desk, his hand hovering before settling on Eli's. You are free, he said. She can't take that from you. Not anymore. Eli wanted to believe him, but Diane's shadow loomed large, a specter he couldn't outrun. That night, Eli painted again, his brush slashing across the canvas with reckless abandon. The colors were darker now, a storm of blacks and blues. But that gold streak remained a stubborn spark of hope. He thought of Nathan, of the way his voice steadied him, of the warmth in his touch. It was dangerous, this pull, but it felt like the first real thing in years. The next morning, Eli found an email from Diane, a long, venomous rant accusing him of betrayal, of seducing Nathan despite her. You're nothing without me, she wrote. You never will be. The words cut deep, reopening wounds he'd thought were healing. He forwarded the email to Nathan, who called immediately. This is harassment, Nathan said, his voice tight with anger. We can file a restraining order. Eli hesitated. A restraining order felt final, a legal severance of the last thread tying him to his mother. But was he ready? He thought of the years spent shrinking under her gaze, of the nights he'd cried himself to sleep, certain he was broken. Nathan's voice broke through his thoughts. You don't have to decide now, but you're not alone in this. They met again that evening, this time at a quiet park near Eli's apartment. The leaves were turning, a riot of red and gold against the gray city. Nathan sat beside him on a bench, their shoulders brushing. I'm stepping back as your therapist, Nathan said, but I don't want to step back from you. Eli's breath caught. What are you saying? Nathan's eyes were steady, unguarded. I'm saying I want to know you, Eli, not as a client, as you. The words hit like a wave, warm and overwhelming. Eli wanted to say yes, to leap into this unknown, but fear held him back. Diane's threats, Nathan's career, their tangled past it was a minefield. Yet sitting there, with Nathan's quiet strength beside him, Eli felt something shift. Maybe he could be more than his mother's shadow. Maybe he could be enough. Days passed, and Eli's world felt like a tightrope. Nathan's confession had lit a spark, but Diane's shadow loomed, threatening to snuff it out. Eli avoided her calls, her texts, her emails, but each one was a needle, pricking at the fragile peace he was building. He painted obsessively now, his apartment a maze of canvases streaked with raw emotion. Each stroke was a rebellion, a claim to the life he wanted. Nathan kept his distance professionally, referring Eli to Dr. Lila Martinez, a therapist with a sharp wit and a no-nonsense approach. Their first session was a relief. Lila didn't know Diane, didn't know Nathan, didn't carry the weight of their tangled mess. You're carrying a lot, Lila said, her voice kind but firm. Let's unpack it, piece by piece. Eli nodded, but his thoughts drifted to Nathan, to the park bench, to the promise of something more. One evening, Eli met Nathan at a small jazz club in Harlem, a place where the music was loud enough to drown out the noise in his head. Nathan looked different here, out of his therapist's chair, looser, more human, his laughter warm as the bourbon they shared. "I used to come here in college," Nathan said, leaning close to be heard over the saxophone. "It was my escape." Eli smiled, feeling the music pulse through him. "What were you escaping?" he asked. Nathan's eyes softened. "Myself. Mostly." They talked for hours, the conversation flowing easily. Nathan's love for old records, Eli's obsession with color theory, their shared fear of being defined by their pasts. For the first time, Eli felt like he was meeting Nathan as an equal, not a patient. But when Nathan's hand brushed his under the table, Eli tensed. "What are we doing, Nathan?" he asked, his voice barely audible over the music. Nathan's gaze was steady. "We're figuring it out. Together." The next day, Diane's campaign escalated. Eli found a letter slipped under his apartment door, her handwriting sharp and accusing. "You think you can replace me? He'll leave you, just like everyone else." The words burned, feeding the doubts Eli had fought so hard to silence. He called Nathan, who arrived within the hour, his face set with determination. "This stops now," Nathan said, reading the letter. "We're going to the police." At the precinct, Eli's hands shook as he filed for a restraining order. The officer was kind but detached, typing up the report as Eli recounted years of Diane's control, her rants, her guilt trips, her refusal to accept him. Nathan sat beside him, a quiet pillar of support. "You're doing the right thing," he said as they left, his hand brushing Eli's back. Eli nodded, but the weight of it all pressed down. Cutting ties was one thing. Surviving the fallout was another. That night, Eli invited Nathan over, needing an anchor. They sat on the couch, the city's hum a distant backdrop. "I'm scared," Eli admitted, his voice small. "What if she's right? What if I'm not enough?" Nathan's hand found his, steady and warm. "You're more than enough," he said. "You're everything she couldn't break." Eli's eyes stung, and for the first time in years, he let himself lean into someone else's strength. Their lips met, tentative at first, then desperate, a collision of need and hope. It wasn't just a kiss, it was a promise, a defiance of the shadows that had haunted Eli for so long. But as they pulled apart, breathless, Eli's phone lit up with a voicemail from an unknown number. Diane's voice slithered through the speaker. "You think a piece of paper will stop me? I'm your mother, Eli. You can't escape me." The words hung in the air, a chilling reminder of the fight ahead. Nathan's arms tightened around Eli, a silent vow. They were in this together. But Diane's wrath was a storm neither could ignore. Eli closed his eyes, clinging to the warmth of Nathan's embrace, praying it would be enough to weather what was coming. The restraining order was granted, a thin shield against Diane's venom. But Eli knew it wouldn't stop her. She was a force of nature, relentless and cunning, her love a twisted knot of possession. He carried the court papers in his bag, a reminder of his defiance, but also of the war he'd started. Nathan, meanwhile, was fighting his own battle. Diane had followed through on her threat, filing a complaint with the state licensing board, accusing him of ethical violations. The accusation hung over them like a guillotine. Eli and Nathan met daily now, their connection deepening despite the chaos. They'd walk through Prospect Park, the autumn leaves crunching underfoot, talking about everything and nothing. Eli's latest painting, Nathan's childhood dog, their shared fear of losing what they'd found. "I don't regret this," Nathan said one afternoon, his hand laced with Eli's. "Even if it costs me everything." Eli wanted to believe him, but guilt gnawed at him. He'd pulled Nathan into his mess, and now they were both drowning. At Lila's office, Eli dug deeper into his past, unearthing memories he'd buried. Diane always made me feel small, he told Lila, his voice raw. Like my bisexuality was a flaw she could fix. Lila nodded, her pen pausing. She's not your truth. Eli. You are. The word stuck with him, a seed of strength he nurtured through his art. His latest canvas was a storm of color blues and grays clashing with vibrant gold, a portrait of his fight to reclaim himself. One night, Eli found a package outside his door. Inside was a photo album, its pages filled with pictures of him as a child smiling, carefree, before Diane's control tightened. A note was tucked inside. You were mine first. Eli's heart pounded as he showed it to Nathan. She's escalating, Nathan said, his voice grim. We need to be careful. They reported the package to the police, but the officer's response was lukewarm. She didn't technically violate the order, he said. It's just a gift. Eli's frustration boiled over. A gift? It was a warning. Nathan stayed over that night, the first time they'd shared a bed. It wasn't about sex, it was about safety, about holding onto something real in the face of Diane's shadow. They lay tangled together, Nathan's breath warm against Eli's neck. I'm not going anywhere, Nathan whispered. Eli clung to those words, but fear lingered. Diane had always found a way to ruin what he loved. The next morning, Eli woke to a call from his boss. A gallery in Chelsea wanted to showcase his work, a chance to step into the spotlight he'd always shied away from. This could be big. Eli, his boss said. Your art's got something real. Eli's heart soared, but the joy was fleeting. As he hung up, a text from Diane appeared. You think you're special now. You'll crash and burn. The timing wasn't a coincidence. She was watching, always watching. Eli showed the text to Nathan, who cursed under his breath. We need to catch her, he said. She's too smart to get caught breaking the order directly. But we can document everything. They started keeping a log, every text, every letter, every sign of Diane's presence. It felt like arming themselves for a war they didn't want to fight. That evening, Eli painted again, pouring his fear and hope into the canvas. The gold streak was brighter now, cutting through the darkness like a beacon. Nathan watched, his presence a quiet strength. You're incredible, he said, his voice soft with awe. Eli smiled, but the weight of Diane's threats pressed down. He was building something beautiful with Nathan, with his art, with himself, but Diane was a wrecking ball, and she was coming for them all. /Xi artifact. Xi artifact artifact equals EB 3.457 off to 2. Artifact version equals beating 17579 C4D4B73 OBF6E. Title equals he underscore cut underscore ties underscore with underscore his underscore toxic underscore mother underscore 5. TXT content type equals text /markdown. The gallery opening was a week away, and Eli's nerves were a live wire. His paintings lined the studio, each one a piece of his soul, raw, vibrant, unapologetic. Nathan had become his biggest cheerleader, helping him select pieces and offering quiet reassurances when doubt crept in. You're ready for this, Nathan said, his hand squeezing Eli's shoulder. The world needs to see you. Eli wanted to believe him, but Diane's shadow clung to him, a whisper that he'd fail. Diane's harassment had grown subtler, more insidious. A bouquet of flowers arrived at Eli's apartment with a card, "For my talented boy, Mom." The gesture was a mockery, a violation disguised as love. Eli reported it, adding it to the growing log of evidence. The police were sympathetic but powerless. Diane hadn't crossed the legal line yet. Nathan's situation was worse. The licensing board had launched an investigation, and he'd been suspended pending a hearing. It's a witch hunt, he told Eli over coffee, his eyes hollow. She's got no proof, but the accusation's enough to do damage. Eli's guilt surged. I brought this on you, he said, his voice breaking. Nathan shook his head. No. She did. And I'd choose you again. Eli. Every time. Their relationship was a quiet rebellion, a fragile thing blooming in the cracks of chaos. They spent evenings cooking together, laughing over burnt pasta, stealing kisses in the glow of Eli's apartment. But every moment was tinged with fear. Diane's next move was always a question mark. One night, Eli found a voicemail from an unknown number. You can't hide forever. Diane's voice hissed. I made you. Eli played it for Nathan, who pulled him close. She doesn't own you, he said fiercely. You're yours. The gallery opening loomed, a beacon of hope and terror. Eli poured himself into his art, each brushstroke a defiance of Diane's voice in his head. Lila helped him navigate the anxiety, pushing him to see his worth beyond his mother's lies. You're not her narrative, Lila said. You're your own. Eli clung to that, but the fear of Diane's sabotage gnawed at him. 2 days before the opening, Eli and Nathan were walking home when they saw her, Diane, standing across the street. Her eyes locked on them. She didn't approach, didn't speak, but her presence was a blade. Nathan's hand tightened on Eli's. She's trying to scare us, he said, his voice steady. Let her try? But Eli's heart pounded. She wasn't just trying to scare them, she was planning something. That night, Eli couldn't sleep. He sat at his easel, painting until dawn, the canvas a battleground of color and emotion. Nathan stayed up with him, his presence a quiet anchor. You're stronger than her, Nathan said, his voice soft but certain. Eli nodded, but doubt lingered. Diane had always known how to break him. What if this time was no different? The morning of the gallery opening, Eli woke to a text from an unknown number. Enjoy your little show. It won't last. His stomach churned, but he showed it to Nathan, who called the police. We're not letting her ruin this, Nathan said, his jaw set. Eli nodded, drawing strength from Nathan's resolve. This was his moment, his art, his life. Diane couldn't take that from him, not anymore. The gallery was alive with light and chatter, a sea of faces admiring Eli's work. His paintings glowed on the walls, bold, chaotic, beautiful. He stood in the center, heart pounding, as strangers praised his vision. Nathan was by his side, his presence a steadying force. You did this, Nathan whispered, his smile proud. Eli felt a rush of joy, but it was fragile, shadowed by the fear of Diane's next move. Halfway through the evening, Eli noticed a woman lingering near his largest painting, a swirling storm of color titled Breaking Free. She was older, her face obscured by a scarf, but something about her posture set Eli's nerves on edge. He nudged Nathan, who followed his gaze. Is that? Nathan started, but before he could finish, the woman turned, revealing Diane's cold, familiar eyes. She didn't approach, didn't speak, but her presence was a violation. The restraining order barred her from contact. But she was here, in Eli's moment of triumph. Eli's hands shook as he pulled out his phone, ready to call the police. But Nathan stopped him. Let's handle this quietly, he said, guiding Eli toward the gallery owner. Sarah. Sarah was quick to act, approaching Diane with a polite but firm request to leave. Diane's smile was venomous. I'm just admiring my son's work, she said, loud enough for heads to turn. Eli's face burned, but he stepped forward, his voice steady. You're not welcome here, Mom. The words were a blade, cutting through years of fear. Diane's eyes narrowed, but she left without a fight. Her parting glance a promise of retribution. The rest of the night was a blur of congratulations and champagne. But Eli couldn't shake the chill of Diane's presence. Nathan stayed close, his hand a quiet reassurance. "You stood up to her," he said later, as they left the gallery. "That was huge." Eli nodded, but his chest was tight. Diane's silence was never the end, it was the calm before the storm. The next day, Nathan's hearing with the licensing board loomed. He was calm, but Eli could see the strain in his eyes. "If I lose my license, I'll figure it out," Nathan said, but his voice betrayed his fear. Eli felt the weight of his role in this mess. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice breaking. Nathan pulled him close. "Don't be. You're worth it." They spent the day preparing, going over Nathan's documentation, rehearsing his statement. Eli's art show had been a success, 3 paintings sold. A review in a local paper, but Diane's shadow tainted it all. That evening, Eli found another note slipped under his door. "You can't win. Eli, I'll always be there." He showed it to Nathan, who cursed. "She's breaking the order now," he said. "We've got her." They reported the note, and the police promised to investigate. But Eli knew Diane was slippery, she'd always been one step ahead. He painted that night, his brush frantic, the canvas a scream of defiance. Nathan watched, his presence a reminder that Eli wasn't alone. "We'll get through this," Nathan said, his voice a vow. Eli nodded, clinging to that promise, even as fear whispered that Diane would never let him go. Nathan's hearing was a cold, sterile affair, held in a conference room that smelled of coffee and bureaucracy. Eli waited outside, his stomach in knots, as Nathan faced the board. He'd submitted every piece of evidence, Diane's texts, her notes, the restraining order, but the board's questions were relentless, probing Nathan's relationship with Eli, their blurred boundaries. Eli hated himself for it, for pulling Nathan into this fire. When Nathan emerged, his face was unreadable. "They're deliberating," he said, his voice flat. "Could take days." Eli reached for his hand, but Nathan pulled back, just slightly. "I need to clear my head," he said, and Eli's heart sank. Was this the beginning of the end? Had Diane's poison seeped into them too? They walked in silence to a nearby cafe, the tension thick. "I'm scared I've ruined you," Eli admitted, his voice small. Nathan's eyes softened. "You haven't. This is on her." But the strain was there, a crack in their foundation. Eli wanted to fight for them, but doubt gnawed at him. What if Nathan resented him? What if this was too much? That night, Eli's phone lit up with a call from the police. Diane had been questioned about the notes, but she denied everything. Her alibi's airtight. "We're watching her," the officer said, but it felt hollow. Eli told Nathan, who nodded grimly. "She's playing a game," he said, "but we're not losing." Eli wanted to believe him, but the weight of Diane's obsession was crushing. The next day, Eli threw himself into his art, preparing for a second gallery show. His work was gaining traction, critics calling it raw and revelatory. But every brushstroke felt like a battle, a fight to claim his voice over Diane's. Nathan was there, helping him frame canvases, his presence a quiet balm. "You're unstoppable," Nathan said, his smile genuine. Eli kissed him, fierce and desperate, needing to believe it. But Diane struck again. A blog post surfaced, anonymous but unmistakably her, accusing Eli of being a troubled artist who'd seduced his therapist. It spread like wildfire, tarnishing Eli's name just as his career was taking off. He stared at the screen, his heart pounding, as Nathan read over his shoulder. "This is libel," Nathan said, his voice tight. We can fight this. They hired a lawyer, a sharp woman named Rachel who specialized in defamation. We'll trace the post, she said. If it's Diane, she's done. Eli nodded. But the damage was done. Galleries were hesitating. Whispers following him. He painted that night. His canvas a scream of red and black. The gold streak fading. Nathan held him as he cried. His tears a mix of rage and grief. I'm so tired. Eli whispered. I know. Nathan said, his voice a lifeline. But we're not done. The breakthrough came unexpectedly. Rachel's team traced the blog post to a cafe Wi-Fi network Diane had used. Her digital footprint a careless mistake. The evidence was enough to strengthen the restraining order and file a defamation suit. Eli felt a flicker of hope, but it was tempered by years of Diane's resilience. She'd slipped through cracks before. Would this be any different? Nathan's hearing concluded with a ruling in his favor. The board found no evidence of misconduct, citing Diane's harassment as the true violation. Nathan's license was safe, but the ordeal had left scars. I thought I'd lose everything, he told Eli, his voice raw. Eli pulled him close, their foreheads touching. You didn't. And you won't. Diane's final act came a week later. She showed up at Eli's apartment, violating the restraining order outright. Her face was a mask of rage and desperation. You can't do this to me, she screamed as the police cuffed her. I'm your mother. Eli stood tall, Nathan by his side. You're nothing to me, he said, his voice steady. It was the truth he'd fought to claim. Diane's arrest marked the end of her reign. She faced charges for harassment and defamation, her influence crumbling. Eli's career rebounded, his art celebrated for its raw honesty. He and Nathan moved forward, their relationship no longer a secret but a strength. They moved in together, a small apartment filled with Eli's canvases and Nathan's records, a space they'd built from the ashes of their pasts. One evening, Eli unveiled a new painting, a vibrant explosion of color, gold streaking through like sunlight. It's us, he told Nathan, his voice soft. What we fought for. Nathan's eyes shone as he pulled Eli close. It's beautiful, he said. And it was not just the painting, but the life they were building, free from Diane's shadow. Eli looked at the canvas, at the gold that refused to fade. He'd cut ties with his toxic mother, faced her wrath, and found something stronger, love. Resilience. Himself. The storm was over. And for the first time, Eli felt truly free.